54% of the divorces that happen in America have something to do with pornography in it. And you believe the lie that people are products and sex is transactional. And you think I can consume this thing and I can find satisfaction because I'm not going to experience rejection. But it all goes back to this identity crisis. And if I am not understanding who I am through sonship or being a daughter or a son of the King of Kings, if that is not where I get my identity, I'm going to believe that I can obtain it elsewhere. And that's why pornography is so prevalent in this culture.
Your story is mind blowing. And I think what it does is it kind of challenges people who have what I call a fussy religious view of the faith, because they're not willing to see that Jesus died to save us from evil, not
Yeah.
to make our lives a little bit better, but to take us from evil, from darkness into light. And no story illustrates that more dramatically than yours. Because I think that there are people that they really can't imagine. I mean, there are people, I'm one of them. You can't really imagine, wow, how does that happen? How does somebody get trapped in something so wicked, so dark? That's the first question. But then how does God reach you? That's even more amazing. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about your story. And I want to be clear, you and Billy have written a book called 7 Lies That Will Ruin Your Life. And so that's the brand new book by Josh Broome and my friend Billy Hallowell, 7 Lies That Will Ruin Your Life. And a lot of your story is woven into there, Josh. But just tell us the story. Where did you grow up and how did you get trapped in this incredibly destructive lifestyle?
Yeah, I think it's like painting the picture from how I ended up there is so important. So I grew up in a small town in South Carolina, and I was born in Charlotte, which I'm actually speaking at a men's event here in Charlotte. So I'm in Charlotte right now. But I was born in Charlotte, grew up in South Carolina, and what was unique about me growing up was that unfortunately it's a normative thing to grow up without a father in your home. But what was unique about my circumstance was that I had a father that was down the street. So the town was so small that he was in close enough proximity to me where I saw him. So being a young man in need of a father or even just a man in my life to show me how to do things and nurture me and hear what we all need to hear, that I'm proud of you. Um, that caused confusion, which led to frustration. And because I could see the thing that I needed and wanted, it increased the feelings of inadequacy. And I believed, well, if I do enough and obtain enough, I will feel like I'm enough. And that's a lie that many of us believe. If I had X, Y, and Z, I would feel differently about myself. And I pursued any and everything I could. So try to make the best grades, try to be the best athlete. And those were ways that I sought out affirmation from others from doing things well. And I started modeling and acting when I was 13 or 14 years old and had some success there. And then continue, living this life and go to college. And I'm studying theater and really more involved in pursuing my dream of being successful in the acting and modeling space. And dropped out of college, moved to Hollywood. And while I'm in Hollywood, I have an agent and I'm doing okay. But like many people who move to Hollywood or Miami or New York, while you're trying to chase your dream, you've got to mitigate your expenses. And I'm working at a restaurant. And while I'm working at a restaurant, three girls approach me and ask, do you want to be an actor? And the acting they were talking about was adult film acting. They were talking about pornography. And you look back, well, I didn't have an example of what it meant to be, really a man. I didn't have a biblical worldview. I had brokenness in my life, and I was exposed to pornography at 13 years old, and that shaped my worldview in terms of what I thought intimacy was, what I thought that a man and a woman interacting with one another in a romantic way. I thought that was what that meant. And that's why it's so important. If you are educated by the world, you will behave like the world. And my experience informed my decisions. And I said yes to something that I thought wasn't that harmful. And I honestly didn't think it would be that big of a deal. So I did one, and my life imploded because the one that I did many years ago, like 2006 is when I did my first film. I did that and it went viral, and a lot of people found out about it, started sharing with me, and then my at the time my mainstream agent discovered that I had done that, and they released me from representing me. And then living in a small town, word travels pretty fast, and my family finds out that I've done this, and now there's this shame and this disconnect from everything I was pursuing. And I believed the lie that, well, because I did this, now I'm attached to that forever, and I might as well continue doing that. But with the same mindset, well, if I become the best, if I become famous, if I make a lot of money, that will mitigate the way that my heart feels.
We have to be clear, and because I think a lot of times people forget that when you're living in the world, when you're not in a Christian community, there's nothing wrong with porn. When you're living in
Right.
that world, nobody has a problem with it. They consume it,
Yeah.
and they don't have any moral qualms. They don't have any moral qualms about sleeping with somebody before marriage. They don't. It's a different world, and when you're
Yep.
in that world, that stuff becomes normative, and most people escape the horror of falling into producing pornography, but some don't. And so there are men and women being preyed upon, and you were one
Yeah.
of them. Somebody approaches you. We've got an easy way for you to make some money. It's so easy. You're a good-looking guy. You want to be in acting, right? Let's check it out. Let's try it. And so there are many people that have been trapped in that lifestyle, in the world of prostitution. There's so many people out there that they've believed these lies. And I want to be clear that, again, this is normative in the world outside of people with a strong Christian background. You know, the idea of frowning on pornography, think, oh, come on, don't be so puritanical. What's the big deal? These people are
Sure.
doing it freely, and on and on and on. And so you're one of those stories, and you're trying to do the best you can. You don't have anybody telling you, hey, this is 100% wrong. You're
Yeah.
in a
Well,
world where people say, you know, why not? You know, you can get ahead, you can make some money.
yeah. I mean, in a real way. So my mom and some of my fraternity brothers from college, and there were a few people in my life saying, "Dude, what are you doing?"
So there were,
This is
okay. So go ahead,
Yeah, so
yeah.
this doesn't align with who I know you to be. And I think like that's the beauty of having true accountability in your life. And it normally works one of two ways. Either someone says, hey, you're doing something outside of who I know you to be, so you get, someone loves you enough to tell you the truth. Like Proverbs 27:3 talks about the wounds of a friend. Sometimes people need to tell you something that stings a little bit for your own good. And I had that, but I didn't respond to what they said. Instead, my shame caused me to think, well, I'm too far gone. So what I did is I
Wow.
removed myself. I isolated myself from them. So I disconnected from everyone,
Yeah.
and I stayed in that industry for 6 years. I did over 1,000 films, and I did everything that I thought would bring me happiness. I made millions of dollars. I got success. I won the awards. I did all the stuff. But after 6 years, and I won Male Performer of the Year in 2012, and I thought, well, if I won that award, and people say that I'm the best, and I win this award for being the best, I'll feel good about myself. But it didn't work. And when it didn't work, my anxiety was amplified, my depression was deepened, and I made a very clear plan to take my life because everything that I wanted was no longer
I
available.
tell you, when we think of, I call it the evilness of evil, how evil Satan is. Because people say, oh, yeah, Satan, the devil. But folks, the evilness of evil, the deception, to suck somebody into something and then to persuade them to take your own life. It's
Yeah.
just so horrifying. Folks, I hate to interrupt, but I just don't want you to miss any of the content we're putting out on here. We've just got some amazing stuff. So would you do yourself a favor and hit the subscribe button so we can make sure you don't miss anything. I promise you, great stuff coming up. Hit the subscribe button. Thank you. I mean, this is like a story like it sounds made up, right? You get sucked into the porn industry. You become a star. You are celebrated in that industry. And all the people in that industry, when you're around people, birds of a feather flock together, it seems normal. And you have metrics of success in that world. People outside the world say, what are you doing? Get out. But in that world, you are being given a lot of money and accolades and awards. And you get to the top of this industry and you say, at that point, with all the money and all the accolades, you felt empty inside and you decided to take your life. What year was this?
This was 2013.
I mean, you had actually decided to do that. I mean,
Yeah, so
why? In other words, where
yeah,
were you
so
in your head that you didn't think you could get out of this, and you decided to take that path out?
Yeah, so I mean, so in a real way, the industry in itself is built upon manipulation, and there's no real consent that exists within the industry because you are made to believe your only worth is tied to selling yourself for sex, and if you don't sell yourself for sex, then you're not good for anything else. So your no doesn't have any validity. So the only thing that you can say is yes, so you don't even bother saying no, and you stay in a place where you could say, well, I don't enjoy doing this, I feel frustrated, I wish I was doing something else. Yet you live in this cognitive dissonance of, well, I know that I could do something else, but what is it? And it's like you're living this contradiction where, so you have to say, I love what I do while you hate it. But so that's where I was. I literally wrote on a piece of paper, I will never be a father. I wanted to become the thing I never had. I'll never be a husband. I saw my mom abused and treated terribly. I knew what a husband wasn't, and I wanted to become a husband. And I wanted to contribute to the world in a way that led to positive change. So those are three things that I wrote on the piece of paper that I was certain that I had disqualified myself from. And if I couldn't do the things that mattered most to me, and my worst mistakes are tangibly found for the world to see, then what am I to do? And what's true, Eric, is that 33, as of last week, 33 people who I knew from the industry, I've been out of that industry for 11 years, have died of suicide or overdose. 600 people in the last 20 years have died of either murder, suicide, or overdose. And the industry's not that big. And it's all because they believe their behavior. I've done bad things, so I'm a bad person. I don't have any value. So what's the point? So a lot of them either take their life or they put themselves in situations that they end up dying. And that's where I was. I made a plan where I was tired of doing what I was doing. There was nothing else that I can do. I disqualified myself from everything that my heart longed for. So what was the point? And I walked into a bank and I wanted justification. I wanted someone to verify the way that I thought about myself. And on a memo of the checks that we would get, there would be this antagonistic comment to continue the belief of, I'm not worth anything, I'm dirty, I'm whatever. So generally, I would go to ATM, Dropbox, mobile deposit. But on this day, I went into a bank and handed this check to a teller, and I wanted her to look at me in disgust or shake her head. And instead, she said, Joshua, are you okay? Joshua, how can I help you? Because she saw me trembling before her. And her words and her response, it provoked me to run instead of die. And I found myself, I quit the industry that day, and I called my mom, and I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, and I started another identity, but it was the same thing. I worked in the health and fitness space. I became, I worked in a gym, and I got all the credentials and got a lot of personal training clients and started making money and started, aesthetically looking like my life was put together, while inside my life was a wreck. I like to say I was trying to put enough good dirt on my bad dirt so I didn't feel dirty. But what was true is, even if I didn't look dirty, inside I was dirty and broken. And after 2 years of that, I meet this girl and I'm like, man, I'm so sick of these like empty relationships or these situations where someone finds out who I used to be and everything blows up, or I lie and I get found out. So I'm just gonna tell this girl the truth. And I told her the truth, and I'm like, hey. And then after hearing this 5 minute monologue of this guy who grew up fatherless and made all these mistakes, and all these mistakes are tangibly found, and I'm just this horrible person, her response was, well, are you doing those things now? And I said, no. And she said, well, a person's not defined by the worst thing they've ever done, and they're not defined by the greatest thing they'll ever do. There's a creator that exists outside of time, space, and matter, and he created you and he created me, and he has the final say. Do you know God? And that walk led me on a journey where she challenged the way that I saw myself, and then we walked and talked, and she invited me to church. And it was in church that next week where I heard this sermon about in 2 Samuel 9 about Mephibosheth and how he was summoned by David, and he saw himself as deserving of death, and he saw himself as this dead dog. But David was so insistent on showing him the loving kindness of God. It changed his life and changed everything, and it
I
changed
want to hear the
me.
rest of the story, folks. This is called a
Yeah.
cliffhanger. We're going to hear the rest of the story. We're talking to Josh Broome, the brand new book, 7 Lies That Will Ruin Your Life. Don't go away. And you're just describing that you're hearing in this sermon stuff that's speaking to you. So keep going.
Yeah, so I hear this sermon about Mephibosheth, and it's 2 Samuel chapter 9, and just it's really just a picture of God's grace, where we were all sinners, Romans 3:23, and we're deserving of death, Romans 6:23, and there's something that we need that we don't have access to, which is a relationship with God. But Jesus comes, being fully man, fully God, dies on the cross, and it raises on the third day, and through what He did, it gives me access to God and changes everything for me. And so for me, like hearing the gospel in its totality, I surrender my life to Christ. And so many beautiful aspects of that story. So number one, that girl that I went on that walk with, her name is Hope, and we've been married for almost 8 years, and we have 4 boys. We have 4 sons. We have a 5, a 3, a 2, and a 7 week old.
Oh,
And and
God
and
bless
then
you.
so yeah, and her name is Hope. So how cool is that? And but so that's amazing in itself. But you read 2 Corinthians 5:17, where that you understand that the old is gone and the new is here, and you're not who you used to be. But it continues. So you're not only saved from something, you're saved for something. And I started getting discipled. 3 days after I gave my life to Christ, I went to this church, and I'm like, hey, I got a story, and I think I need to be able to understand the Bible to tell it well. And this guy, Andrew Yates, that just finished at Dallas Theological Seminary, he had moved to Raleigh, and he was a new pastor there, and he discipled me. We spent around 10 hours a week together for a few seasons. And then I went to Liberty University and studied Christian ministry, and I served on staff at a few churches. And God continued to open door after door. But what He did, He hid me for a season, because there needed to be healing. There needed to be a foundation of my faith to be built. There needed to be all these things that I needed to heal from, so that now I have a wound in my story, but that wound has been healed, and that wound has a scar. But that scar, it doesn't point to fatherlessness or pornography. It points to the only one that can heal, who is Jesus. And I love sharing my story. And the book in itself is, hey, here is the lessons from someone who has believed the lies of the world and the lies that destroyed myself. But there is a person of Jesus that has come, and I can have reconciliation with God. So that's the starting block. But also, how do you rebuild your life? Because there's so many people, it's like, okay, now what? I give my life to Jesus, now what? What does it look like, the practicalities of me transforming your life? Like, how do I be in a relationship with someone where we're going to be walk in purity? We're going to be abstinent after I live the life that I lived. We're going to go to premarital counseling, and I'm going to learn all these things. And it's like there's so many failed attempts, as we're trying to modify our behavior through the management of our heart. But our heart is, as Jeremiah talks about, is wicked and deceitful among all things. We can't trust it. And there's this cognitive dissonance where in like Romans 7, where we want to do things that we ought not do, and we struggle to do the things that we can do. And to your point, why is that? Because there is an enemy that wants to destroy you. There's an enemy that wants to distract, destroy, kill, and keep you from the abundance that is found in the person of Jesus. And that's what this book is about. There
And
is an enemy that wants to destroy you. There's lies that he wants you to believe. He's the father of lies, but there's also truth.
And let's be clear, folks, you can be born again. You can say, I accept Jesus into my heart, yada, 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 but you can still believe a bunch of lies. And that's the process of sanctification and redemption, that you're not done when you get saved. You just cross the starting line, not the finish
Yeah.
line. That's the starting line. Now you can ask God to heal you. Some people need deliverance. There are tons of Christians that need actual deliverance, that need inner healing, that need counseling, that need teaching. And that God is in that business. And so I hope that Joshua's story encourages you. Josh, what are some of the lies? The title of the book is 7 Lies That Will Ruin Your Life. Let's just go through a few of them in the time we have left.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the first one is this lie of approval, so false approval, and thinking that you can earn the approval that you need from having enough people in your life, having the right people in your life. If you have enough affirmation, if you have enough achievements, if you have the right car, the right house, the right amount of followers on whatever social media platform, if you have the blue check mark, you will feel as if you're approved. But we were built to operate from approval through what happened on the cross. We're not to earn anything. If we understand we are operating from approval, that is because of what Jesus has done, and there's nothing that we could ever do to obtain that. It changes everything. But the world tells you that, well, this is what success looks like. This is what happiness looks like. This is what sex is. This is what marriage is. And it's everything but what is true. And if you, and that points to the second lie, this the God of the self. And there's this really beautiful story in Exodus 32 where you see Moses is up on the mountain getting the 10 Commandments, and Aaron and his band of misfits are waiting, and they think it's a good idea to melt down all of their jewelry and make this golden animal, sometimes referenced as a golden calf, and they even call it Yahweh. And what we've done many times in American culture is we take our presuppositions, our pain, our sin, our preference, and we superimpose those onto what we call our worshiping Jesus. But actually, we've created a God in our own image with our own preferences and our own thoughts. And we've abstracted the beauty and the purity and the righteousness of a holy and perfect God. So what we're worshiping is not ourselves. We're worshiping exactly what Satan wants us to worship.
I tell you, this is, I mean, I talk about this. I have a book coming out called Religionless Christianity. There are a lot of people doing dead religion. You're going to church, you're going through the motions, and your heart, you're getting it wrong. It's important we understand these things. The book is 7 Lies That Will Ruin Your Life. 7 Lies That Will Ruin Your Life. Josh Broome is my guest. We'll be right back. I think we need these stories, Josh, because a lot of people, they're first of all, they're not aware of evil. They're not aware that there's a devil who wants to take whomever he can into the darkest places and throw away the key. And God is in the business of redeeming, and your story is that story. It's amazing. So the brand new book is 7 Lies That Will Ruin Your Life. So what are some of these lies? We mentioned a couple of them, but let's keep going.
Yeah, so we talked about, this false approval, believing that you can find approval in the world. We talked about this God of self and thinking that, from the garden, if I can create my own autonomy, I can know what's best for me, and what is true, we're a terrible Lord. And that's exactly what Satan wants from you. And I think a really important thing that I can speak into in a unique way is this counterfeit intimacy. And intimacy, from a biblical perspective, is not sex. While sex can be part of what exists in the realm of intimacy, intimacy in itself is proximity to God. And if you understand that intimacy is found in the presence of God, surrendered to the person of God, satiated by the word of God, then that's the only place that you can find the only place you can find satisfaction. That's the only place that your soul can be at rest, because you were created to desire that thing. And while all emotions are God given, if you believe a lie that you can find intimacy in a counterfeit place and it will satisfy you, I mean, that is, why the pornography industry is so like there's so much proclivity around that. Because I mean, you look at Major League Baseball, NBA, NFL, all combined, and pornography grosses far more. You take Netflix, Disney combined, pornography grosses far more. 33% of all data transferred on the internet on a daily basis, pornography. 54% of the divorces that happen in America have something to do with pornography in it. And you've believed the lie that people are products and sex is transactional. And you think, I can consume this thing and I can find satisfaction because I'm not going to experience rejection. But it all goes back to this identity crisis. And if I am not understanding who I am through sonship, or being a daughter or a son of the King of Kings, if that is not where I get my identity, I'm going to believe that I can obtain it elsewhere. And that's why pornography is so prevalent in this culture, because, and if I'm honest, that's why my story is such an anomaly, because we've made sex a god and we worship it. So me coming out of that industry and preaching the gospel is such an anomaly, because we worship sex. If you want to sell, if you want to sell movies, what? Sex and violence. So I would just say, man, God is better. And until you understand that, like to your point, there's a generation of people who have experienced the forgiveness that comes from First John, but they haven't experienced the deliverance and healing that comes from James 5:16. There's a spirit of confession that needs to happen. The thing that you struggle with, you feel like is unmentionable. Once you speak it, the enemy loses its power over you. And once you speak that thing that you've been just dwelling on for so long that you hope no one will find out about, or you're too ashamed to talk about, that is how the enemy is holding you hostage. And truth is the thing that's going to set you
And
free,
that is
because
the
you are
power.
only, yeah,
That's the power of your story, that you give
yeah,
people hope. People who have no hope, check out this man's story and you will see what God
yeah,
can do. Just a joy, Josh, to have you back. Josh Broome
yeah.
is my guest. The book, 7 Lies That Will Ruin Your Life. God bless you, Josh. Thank you.
Thank you so much.